A brass .45 caliber casing sits on Al Capone's desk at his Miami Beach estate, February 15, 1929. Morning sun reflects off mahogany. Capone rolls it between his fingers while reading the Chicago Tribune headline, "7 Dead in Valentine's Day Massacre." His enforcer delivered it overnight, proof the job was done. That single casing represents $50,000 paid, 7 rivals dead, Bugs Moran's empire finished. Capone commissioned custom Thompson guns 3 months earlier, 5,000 each. Planning started in November 1928 when Moran's liquor trucks hit Capone's Southside operations. The bullet came from gun number 2, the backup shooter nobody talks about. Capone keeps it as a reminder: control the cops, control the city. Steam rises from his coffee. His accountant walks in with the ledger. Bootlegging profits up 300% this quarter. But Miami's DA wants him back in Chicago for questioning. Mystery. What did Capone know that nobody else did? Why keep the evidence? Late November 1928, Chicago's South Side. Al Capone controlled everything below Madison Street: speakeasies, brothels, gambling dens, the whole machine. He was worth an estimated $100 million. But Bugs Moran's North Side gang kept hijacking his Canadian whiskey shipments. 3 months, $500,000 in lost revenue. Capone didn't lose money. He eliminated problems. The solution formed over cigars in his Lexington hotel suite. Take out Moran's entire command structure. One morning, one location. Make it look like official business. His crew nodded. They knew what official business meant: police uniforms, badges, a stolen squad car. Valentine's Day timing wasn't sentiment, it was strategy. Everyone would be thinking about sweethearts, not suspicion. Capone stubbed out his cigar. "I want proof when it's done," he said. One bullet casing would do. December 1928. Capone bought a Miami Beach mansion for $40,000 cash, palm trees and ocean views. The purchase wasn't about comfort, it was about distance. His rule: never be in the same city as the hit. He invited Dade County's district attorney to a meeting scheduled for February 14, 1929, 10:30 in the morning. Time-stamped witness, ironclad alibi. Meanwhile, his Detroit contact delivered 4 Thompson submachine guns, the kind that could fire 70 rounds in 90 seconds. Cost: $5,000 each, $20,000 total. Capone's accountant noted it as equipment expenses. In a Southside warehouse, his crew rehearsed the fake raid. Timing drills, positions, exit routes. They stole a Cadillac police car, got authentic badges from corrupt cops on payroll. Everything had to look official, routine, boring even. Before leaving for Miami, Capone handed his enforcer a single .45 caliber round. "Bring me one of these when it's finished," he said. The enforcer understood. Proof mattered more than promises. January 1929. The bait required precision. Capone's insider tipped Moran about a special whiskey delivery at the SMC Cartage Company garage, 2122 North Clark Street. High-quality Canadian stock below market price. Moran scheduled 7 of his top men for 10:30 a.m. pickup on February 14th. Perfect. Capone's crew knew the garage layout, the brick wall, the sight lines. They ran through it again in the warehouse. 5 men dressed as cops, 2 in plain clothes. The raid would take 90 seconds. Line them against the wall, hands up, standard search procedure. Then the Thompson guns from under the coats. 70 rounds, no survivors. Moran had a habit, always 5 minutes late to meetings. His paranoia was legendary. Capone's crew planned for it. They'd be gone before he arrived. The stolen Cadillac sat ready, police star painted on the door. Real uniforms hung on hooks. By late January, everything was in position. Capone boarded a train to Miami. The brass casing in his enforcer's pocket felt heavier than it should. February 14th, 1929, 10:25 a.m. 7 of Moran's men waited inside the garage: Frank and Peter Gusenberg, Albert Weinshank, Adam Heyer, Reinhard Schwimmer, Albert Kakalek, John May. They smoked cigarettes, checked watches. The whiskey truck was late. Outside, morning frost covered North Clark Street. At 10:28, a Cadillac police car pulled up. 5 men in Chicago PD uniforms stepped out, badges gleaming. Standard raid. The 7 men inside barely looked up. Cops raided speakeasies daily, part of the game. Hands on the wall, one uniform ordered. They complied. Routine, boring, hands flat against cold brick. Then the Thompson guns came out from under the coats. The sound was catastrophic. 70 rounds in 90 seconds, .45 caliber bullets and shotgun blasts. The brick wall exploded with impacts. Blood sprayed 6 feet wide. Brass casings bounced on concrete, clinking like coins. At 10:29, Bugs Moran turned the corner onto North Clark. He saw the police car, the uniforms. Raid, he muttered and walked away. His paranoia saved his life. Inside the garage, 7 men lay against the wall. One was still breathing. 10:32 a.m. A neighbor called the real Chicago police. 2 officers arrived expecting a routine disturbance. They found Frank Gusenberg on the floor, 14 bullets in him, still alive. "Who shot you?" they asked. His eyes focused briefly. "Nobody shot me," he whispered. He'd die 3 hours later without naming anyone. The other 6 were already dead. Peter Gusenberg, Weinshank, Heyer, Schwimmer, Kachelik, May. Blood pooled across the concrete. The brick wall would carry visible bullet impacts for decades. 70 brass casings littered the floor. Thompson submachine guns, shotguns, .45 pistols. The coroner arrived and started counting. This wasn't gang war. This was execution, professional, planned. Meanwhile, 2,000 miles south, Al Capone sat in his Miami Beach study with Dade County's district attorney. They discussed tax assessments, property values, charitable donations. The DA noted the time, 10:30 a.m. exactly. Capone seemed relaxed, almost jovial. His alibi was minute-by-minute documented. His enforcer had left Chicago on the overnight train, a single warm brass casing wrapped in cloth in his coat pocket. By evening, that casing would sit on Capone's mahogany desk. Proof. The phone rang in Miami at 2 p.m. Coded message, Valentine delivered. Capone nodded. The DA was still there, talking about civic responsibility. Perfect. February 15th. Chicago newspapers screamed massacre across front pages. The nation was horrified. 7 men executed like cattle. Photos of the brick wall, blood still visible. The public wanted answers. Al Capone issued a statement from Miami. "I'm a businessman, not a gangster. I was in Florida when this happened. Ask the district attorney. He'll confirm it." The DA did confirm it. Capone had an unshakable alibi. The FBI opened a file. Chicago PD faced enormous pressure. Bugs Moran gave his own statement. "Only Capone kills like that." He didn't need proof. He knew. But knowing and proving were different games. The twist nobody expected. 2 of the shooters were actual Chicago police officers, moonlighting for Capone's crew. They'd worn their real uniforms, carried their real badges. When investigators canvassed the neighborhood, witnesses described police conducting a raid. Technically accurate. The dirty cops split $10,000 and disappeared into Capone's South Side network. You think corruption was occasional? Half the department was on Capone's payroll. The massacre was their masterpiece, and hide in plain sight used the system itself as camouflage. In Miami, Capone rolled the brass casing between his fingers during breakfast. The morning sun made it gleam. His empire was about to expand dramatically. Moran's North Side territory sat wide open, leaderless. The profits would be staggering. Spring 1929. The FBI tracked the Thompson guns to a Detroit dealer. Dead end. The purchase was cash, no names, no records. Capone's enforcer, who delivered the brass casing to Miami, vanished. Lake Michigan, most likely. Concrete boots. Loose ends disappeared in Capone's world. Bugs Moran became obsessed with revenge, but his empire was crumbling. Without his top 7 men, the Northside organization fell apart. Capone's crews moved in, took over speakeasies, gambling operations, smuggling routes. Profits soared. Bootlegging revenue increased 300% by summer. The massacre had worked perfectly, except for one detail. A witness came forward claiming to identify 2 of the shooters. The FBI followed the lead for 6 months, Wrong suspects entirely. The case stalled. The real shooters were either dead or so deep in Capone's network they'd never surface. Chicago PD faced a brutal truth. They couldn't solve a massacre committed by their own officers. The department's corruption went bone deep. Capone understood power's real secret. You didn't fight the system, you bought it. Judges, cops, politicians, all on payroll. The brass casing sat in a drawer now, wrapped in the cloth. Sometimes late at night, Capone would take it out, feel its weight. That tiny piece of metal represented everything. The planning, the execution, the expansion, the proof that he was untouchable. Or so it seemed. In Washington, D.C., a young IRS agent named Elliot Ness was reading the massacre file with fresh eyes. He saw something everyone else missed. 1930. Ness took a different approach. Forget the massacre. You couldn't prove murder without witnesses, and all the witnesses were dead or corrupt or terrified. But the massacre made Capone famous, and fame created exposure. The newspapers called him public enemy number one. That attention was dangerous for a man who'd never filed accurate tax returns. Ness realized the massacre was Capone's greatest success and his fatal mistake. It made him too visible to ignore, too notorious to protect. The IRS began building a tax evasion case. Meanwhile, an anonymous package arrived at the FBI's Chicago office. Inside, 1.45 caliber brass casing. No note, no return address. Ballistics tested it against recovered evidence. It matched the massacre. Same batch, same weapon type. Someone was sending a message. The FBI cross-referenced it with later gun seizures in Detroit. The link led back to Capone's known associates, the original purchase. Not enough for murder charges, but enough to establish a pattern. Capone in Miami received word about the casing's arrival at the FBI. He opened his desk drawer. The casing he'd kept, it was gone. His enforcer was already dead, couldn't have taken it, which meant someone in his inner circle had betrayed him, not for justice, for positioning. Someone wanted to weaken him without destroying him entirely, create an opening for their own advancement. Capone's paranoia intensified. He started suspecting everyone. The brass casing that was supposed to be proof of his power had become evidence of his vulnerability. The massacre's aftermath became its own disaster. Public outrage was overwhelming. Mothers, clergy, business leaders demanded federal action against gangsters. The violence had gone too far. 7 men executed on a holiday morning? Americans wanted the gangster era to end. Prohibition repeal discussions intensified. If legal alcohol eliminated the profit motive, maybe the violence would stop. Capone's $100 million empire was suddenly the nation's primary target. Every federal agency wanted a piece of him. The massacre made him too famous to protect, too notorious to ignore. 2 of the massacre participants were found dead within a year, Capone tying up loose ends. But each murder added to the pressure. He'd become a symbol of everything wrong with American cities. The irony was sharp. The massacre was meant to eliminate Moran and expand territory. Instead, it unified public opinion against organized crime. Bugs Moran, desperate and diminished, became an FBI informant. Not out of courage, out of survival. He fed them financial information, details about Capone's operations, anything to stay useful and alive. His testimony wouldn't help with murder charges, but it provided crucial evidence for tax evasion. The federal case grew stronger daily. By late 1930, Capone knew something was coming. He couldn't see exactly what, but the pressure was building. His lawyers prepared defenses for everything: bootlegging, murder, racketeering. They never expected the government's actual strategy: taxes. The brass casing sat in the FBI evidence locker now, tagged and cataloged. It would never officially link to Capone, but its journey from the massacre to his desk to the FBI told the story of an empire cracking. October 1931, United States versus Alphonse Capone. The trial wasn't about 7 men against a brick wall. It was about $215,000 in unpaid taxes. The prosecutor laid out Capone's income: speakeasies, gambling, brothels, bootlegging. The defense argued he reported what he owed. The prosecution showed the math didn't add up. Bugs Moran's testimony helped establish the financial networks. Other informants, terrified but cooperating, provided ledger details. The jury heard about mansions, cars, suits, jewelry, a lifestyle requiring millions. Yet Capone's tax returns claimed modest income. You think that was defensible? The judge didn't. Guilty on 5 counts. The sentence shocked everyone. 11 years in federal prison. The harshest penalty ever given for tax evasion. The real reason? Public pressure from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The judge couldn't convict Capone for those 7 deaths, but he could remove him from society. The courtroom was silent when the sentence came down. Capone's lawyers filed appeals. They all failed. By 1934, he was transferred to Alcatraz, the new federal supermax prison on an island in San Francisco Bay. The brass casing remained in the FBI evidence locker in Chicago, never officially linked to anyone. But everyone knew it was Capone's casing, from Capone's massacre, the symbol of his perfect crime that became his downfall. Alcatraz broke him. The isolation, the routine, the powerlessness, everything he'd built was gone. By 1938, his syphilis was advanced, untreated for years, eating through his brain. The man who controlled 10,000 speakeasies couldn't control his own thoughts. He shuffled through the prison yard, confused, diminished. Guards reported he sometimes thought he was still running Chicago, giving orders to associates who weren't there. Released in 1939, he returned to his Miami Beach mansion, the same house where he'd built his alibi 8 years earlier. He was 40 years old and mentally destroyed. His empire had dissolved. The outfit continued without him. New leaders, new strategies. Capone spent his final years in the mansion's 2nd floor, staring at the ocean, barely recognizing family. None of the massacre shooters were ever convicted. The brick wall from the SMC Carthage garage was saved when the building was demolished. It became a tourist attraction, pieces sold to collectors. The massacre became legend. Chicago's most notorious crime. Capone died in 1947, brain damaged and powerless. The brass casing outlived him. The FBI eventually donated the brass casing to a mob museum in Las Vegas. It sits in a display case now under glass, a placard explaining its history. 70 bullets were fired that Valentine's morning. 7 men died against a brick wall in Chicago. One empire was destroyed, not by the bullets themselves, but by the attention they created. Capone's perfect crime became his perfect execution. He'd planned everything with meticulous precision. The alibi 2,000 miles away, the distance from the killing, the proof delivered in his enforcer's pocket. He'd controlled the cops, bought the judges, eliminated his rivals in 90 seconds of Thompson gunfire. But he couldn't control the one thing that mattered most: public opinion. The massacre turned ordinary Americans against gangsters with an intensity that changed federal policy forever. Within 4 years, prohibition was repealed. The profit motive for bootlegging evaporated. Within 5 years, Capone was in Alcatraz, isolated on an island, his mind deteriorating from untreated syphilis. The brass casing represents a fundamental truth about power that Capone learned too late. Visibility is vulnerability. He kept it on his mahogany desk as proof of his control, his reach, his untouchable status. Instead, it became evidence of his recklessness, his arrogance, his fatal miscalculation. That tiny piece of metal outlived everyone involved in the massacre. The 5 shooters in police uniforms, the 7 victims lined against the wall, the enforcers who planned it, the boss who ordered it from Florida. It's cold now, inert, just brass and history behind museum glass. Tourists photograph it daily, read the placard, move on to the next exhibit. But if you look close, really examine what that casing represents, you can see the entire architecture of Capone's downfall. One decision, one February morning, one massacre that killed 7 men but destroyed the man who orchestrated it from 2,000 miles away. The casing sits in the museum next to photographs of the brick wall, the blood pools, the newspaper headlines. Visitors ask the same question: was Capone a genius or just greedy? The answer is simpler than that. He was a businessman who forgot that some transactions have costs you can't calculate in advance. 70 bullets minus 7 rivals equals 1 target painted permanently on your back. Capone rolled that brass casing between his fingers in Miami, February 1929, believing he'd won the war for Chicago. He had won, for exactly 2 years and 8 months. Then the public, the FBI, the IRS, the entire system he thought he'd purchased. They all came for him with the patience of bureaucracy and the weight of outraged citizens. The brass casing stayed in evidence while Capone went to Alcatraz. The legend never left Chicago. And Capone? He died in 1947, confused and diminished, forgotten by everyone who once feared him, remembered only by history books and museum placards. The secret was never in the killing. It was in understanding what you keep, and what keeps you